A respected judge, a woman who spent her life delivering justice, a family bound by blood, torn apart by something no one saw coming, and a secret so devastating it led to an unthinkable act. The walls of their home held more than just memories. They held whispers of betrayal, of forbidden truths that were never meant to see the light of day. But when the truth surfaced, it did so in blood. This wasn't a crime of passion. It wasn't a random act of violence. This was something far worse, something planned, something deliberate, a tragedy that would leave an entire city searching for answers. This is the case of Chicago judge who did the unthinkable. The question is, why? If you uncover the most terrifying truth about someone you love, how far would you go to keep it buried? Stay with us as we unravel the shocking reality behind this crime. It was a night like any other, or so it seemed. On the evening of date, a call was made to 911 from a prestigious home tucked away in one of Chicago's most affluent neighborhoods. When officers arrived at the scene, they were greeted by a horrific sight, one they could scarcely comprehend. Judge Name, a figure known throughout the city for her steady hand and fair judgments, was found covered in blood, surrounded by the bodies of her own family, a mother, a father, a younger brother, and a teenage sister, each one brutally murdered. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now stood silent, tainted by an unspeakable crime. But what makes this case even more disturbing isn't just the brutal nature of the killings. It's that there were no signs of a struggle, no forced entry, no broken windows, no signs of an intruder lurking in the shadows. The scene suggested something far more chilling, something much closer to home. The police were left with one haunting question. If this wasn't the work of an outsider, then who could have committed such a cold-blooded act? The answer was almost too unbelievable to fathom. The person responsible for the savage act? Judge Name herself. A woman entrusted with the power of the law. A woman who had spent years sentencing criminals to prison. But now, the very judge who once upheld justice had become the criminal. But why? Why would a woman, sworn to uphold the law, shatter everything she stood for? What could drive a person to commit such a horrific act? And more chillingly, how could a person responsible for such an atrocity keep it hidden from the world? These are the questions that linger as the pieces of this puzzle slowly start to fall into place. Before she became the woman in handcuffs, before the walls of her home were soaked in blood, Judge Name was a symbol of justice, a respected figure in Chicago's legal system, a woman who built her life on discipline, logic, and law. She stood in courtrooms, delivering sentences that changed lives. But outside the courthouse, she was just another daughter, another sister, another mother, a woman with a family that, to the outside world, seemed perfectly ordinary. But inside those walls, away from the cameras in the courtroom, there was something else, something hidden, something no one saw coming. To understand how a woman so revered could be capable of such an unspeakable act, we have to go back to where it all began. In the courtroom, she was known for her sharp intellect, her no-nonsense approach. Some describe her as relentless, a woman who could see through lies with unnerving precision. Over the years, she built a reputation, handing down harsh but fair rulings, refusing to bend to pressure. She believed in justice. She believed in order. But at home, behind closed doors, the lines between justice and judgment weren't as clear. To the public, she was a devoted mother, a loving daughter, an older sister who cared deeply for her family. At least, that's what it looked like. Those who knew them best would later reveal a different story. A home where tensions simmered beneath the surface. A family held together not by love, but by obligation. And at the center of it all, her younger brother, the boy who, in ways no one could have imagined, would become the key to everything. On the outside, they were the picture-perfect family. But inside, there were whispers, secrets, unspoken truths that festered in the silence. And at the heart of it all, her 15-year-old brother, a boy with a secret of his own. His relationships, his actions, the people he was involved with, it was all carefully concealed. Until it wasn't. What he had been hiding was never meant to come to light. But someone found out. Someone close. And once the truth was exposed, there was no going back. What started as whispers became arguments. Arguments turned to threats. And threats turned to something far worse. The walls of their home could no longer contain what had been buried for so long. The tension reached its breaking point. And then on one fateful night, it all came crashing down. March date, year, just past midnight. The first gunshot rang out. Then another, and another. The silence that followed was deafening. At exactly 12:13 a.m., a call was made to 911. The voice on the other end was eerily calm. "They're all gone," the caller said. "I did it." When officers arrived, they found Judge Name standing in the foyer, blood on her hands, her clothes, her face. Her expression was blank, as if she had already left the moment behind. The victims, her own family, lay lifeless around her. A mother, a father, a teenage sister, and her 15-year-old brother, the one who had unknowingly set everything in motion. But here's the part that left investigators unsettled. When asked why she did it, she didn't hesitate. She didn't stutter. She simply answered, "I had no choice." Was she protecting herself? Hiding something? Or was there another layer to this story? One even more unsettling than the crime itself? The investigation was just beginning, and what they would uncover next would leave even the most seasoned detectives speechless. The crime itself was shocking, but what came after would leave investigators with more questions and answers. What could drive a respected judge to commit an act so unthinkable? Was it rage? Was it fear? Or was there something else? Something deeper. Something no one was prepared for? The crime scene told a story, but it was a story with missing pieces. Bullet casings were scattered across the floor. Blood pooled in different rooms, suggesting movement, not a single contained event. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle, no defensive wounds on the victims. This wasn't a chaotic act of passion. It was controlled, intentional. And then there was the gun, the weapon used to end 4 lives, found resting on the kitchen counter, wiped clean of prints. Judge Name was found standing near it, her hands covered in blood. But she wasn't holding the weapon when police arrived. She didn't run. She didn't resist. She just stood there, as if she was waiting for them. When questioned, she was calm. Too calm. Her answers were measured, deliberate. She admitted to the killings without hesitation. No excuses. No justifications. Just a simple statement. It had to be done. But had it? And if so, why? Detectives needed answers. The evidence pointed to her, but the motive? That part remained unclear. As investigators sifted through her past, her career, her family dynamics, they began to piece together something troubling, something that went beyond a simple act of violence. She was known for a cold, calculated approach to justice. But was that coldness reserved only for the courtroom, or had it seeped into her home? At first, it seemed like an open-and-shut case. A woman who snapped. A tragic case of a mind pushed too far. But then something didn't add up. There was something investigators hadn't expected. Among the scattered belongings, a note was found, torn into pieces but still legible. It wasn't written by the judge. It wasn't addressed to her either. It was from someone else. Someone who knew the family secret, and someone who had warned that it was only a matter of time. Who wrote it, and what exactly was supposed to be stopped? And then came the discovery that changed everything. A blurred figure, moving outside the home just minutes before the first shot was fired. The footage was grainy, the face unrecognizable. But one thing was clear. Judge Name may not have been alone that night. Had she acted alone? Or was there someone else in the house that night? Someone who walked away, leaving her to take the fall? Experts began weighing in. Was this an act of rage? A psychotic break? Or was there something far more methodical behind it? Her demeanor was unsettling. No outbursts. No remorse. No pleas for innocence. She listened. She nodded. And when asked if she understood the charges, she simply said, "Yes." There were no previous signs of mental instability, no record of violent behavior. If she had planned this, she had hidden it well, too well. And then the investigation took another turn. A quiet admission from law enforcement. They were no longer sure she had done it alone. If there was someone else, they had vanished without a trace. Who was the person seen near the house? Why was the murder weapon wiped clean? And what did the note mean? Had she been protecting someone, or had she been set up? As the trial loomed, one thing became clear. This case wasn't over. Not even close. It was a trial unlike any other. A judge, once respected, now infamous, sat on the opposite side of the bench, no longer the one delivering justice, but the one awaiting judgment. The nation watched. The courtroom was filled beyond capacity. Lawyers, reporters, spectators, all of them desperate for the truth. But was the truth something the court was prepared to hear? For weeks, the prosecution and defense battled over the same question. Was this a calculated act of murder? Or was Judge Name pushed beyond her limits, forced to do the unthinkable? The prosecution painted a chilling picture. A woman who had spent years upholding the law, who knew every loophole, every technicality, every way to cover her tracks. They argued that she wasn't a victim of circumstance. She was in control from the very beginning. Every bullet fired, every action taken, it was all part of plan. They pointed to the lack of hesitation, the way she had wiped the gun clean, the confession, delivered with a voice so steady, so deliberate, that it sent chills through the courtroom. It had to be done, she had said. But the prosecution had one question. Did it, or had she made a choice long before that night? The forensics left little room for doubt. The shots were precise. No signs of a struggle. No evidence of self-defense. This wasn't an act of desperation. It was an execution. She knew exactly what she was doing, the prosecutor said. And now she must face the consequences. But the defense had a different story to tell. One of a woman pushed to the edge. A woman who had spent her life enforcing justice, only to realize justice had no place in her own home. Her attorneys described a woman unraveling under the weight of unimaginable pressure, a mind fractured by years of secrets, by the fear of what her younger brother's hidden affairs could bring to light. They called it a breaking point, a moment where reason was lost and survival took over. She wasn't acting as a judge that night, the defense attorney argued. She was acting as a sister, as a daughter, as a woman who believed she had no other choice. The argument struck a nerve. Had she been a ruthless killer, or was she a woman pushed too far? The jury had to decide. After weeks of testimony, after every shocking detail had been laid bare, 12 jurors walked into a room and emerged with a decision that would send shockwaves across the nation. The room was silent, the air so thick no one dared to breathe. And then, some called it justice. Others called it tragedy. But the question remained, did the court get it right? Across the country, debates raged. Was she a cold-blooded killer? Or was she another victim of the secrets that had been buried for too long? Her story was over. But the questions, they were just beginning. Now it's your turn. Was she a woman pushed to the edge, or a calculated murderer? Was justice served, or was this another failure of the system? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more cases like this, hit that subscribe button. Because the truth, it's never as simple as it seems. It's the kind of place where silence doesn't simply exist. It weighs heavy, like an unwelcome guest that refuses to leave. The kind of silence that echoes long after the tragedy has unfolded. No one can say for sure when the moment of no return happens, when a person's mind fractures. But when it does, the consequences are irreversible. And as we step further into the aftermath of what transpired here, we begin to ask a question that, frankly, no one has an answer to. Could this have been avoided? What happened to the brothers' secrets? In the days that followed the event, investigators uncovered layers of deception, hidden not just from the public, but from the very people who should have known better. His family, his friends, even his colleagues. Was this a family torn apart by greed? Or something far darker, buried in the unspoken, in the silence of years gone by? The family dynamic was fractured from the start. What we know now is that the killer, in this case, had been harboring feelings of resentment for years. But it's more than just anger. It's the way that anger manifests itself. Deep-rooted distrust, jealousy, the feeling of being overlooked. It can turn into something monstrous when given the right conditions. It's difficult to imagine how a family, one so full of hope, can end up here. There's something tragic in the way the past plays out in the present, something inescapable about the emotional weight carried by each of those involved. The brothers, once close, no longer share the same bloodline of trust. One brother lived in the shadow of the other, always overshadowed, always playing second fiddle. That imbalance, that feeling of inadequacy, festered in the darker corners of his mind, until it became a storm that could no longer be ignored. Psychological breakdowns aren't always sudden. They often come in slow, creeping waves. And when they break, when the dam of repressed thoughts, emotions, and desires finally shatters, the fallout can be catastrophic. What drives someone to kill their own flesh and blood? The question is both simple and impossibly complex. Was it revenge? Or something more subtle, more insidious? The feeling of not being seen, not being heard, even by those you thought you loved most? In cases like this, it's often a combination of unresolved trauma, deep-seated feelings of inferiority, and perceived betrayal. This individual didn't just feel overlooked, they felt betrayed. The person they looked up to, who they should have been able to rely on, had failed them in their eyes. And that sense of betrayal, it's the kind of thing that transforms over time. What starts as frustration can evolve into something far more dangerous. Could this have been prevented? It's the question that haunts everyone involved, the detectives, the family, the community. Could someone have seen the signs? Could the brother have been saved before it was too late? The truth is, the path to violence isn't always linear. It's a series of small decisions, missteps, and missed opportunities. The people closest to him didn't see the darkness lurking beneath the surface, or if they did, they couldn't or wouldn't believe it. In the wake of it all, the family is left with a void that can never be filled, a tragedy that wasn't just felt in the moment of death, but continues to resonate, reverberating through every life touched by it. There's no justice here, no clear conclusion. The brothers are gone, but the damage lingers, rippling outward like the final, desperate cries of someone drowning in their own mind. And so, we return to the question we started with. Could this have been avoided? Maybe, but in the end, it's a question that doesn't have an answer, because in the quiet spaces of human minds, secrets are sometimes buried too deep to ever be unearthed in time. Justice is supposed to be blind, impartial, unshaken. But what happens when the very person entrusted with upholding the law is the one breaking it? This case was never just about a single act of violence. It was about deception so deeply woven into the fabric of everyday life that no one saw it until it was too late. It was about the secrets people keep, the masks they wear, and the quiet destruction that unfolds behind closed doors. No one wants to believe that the person they respect, the person they trust, could be capable of something like this. The truth is, trust is fragile. It's built over years, but it only takes a moment to shatter. And when it breaks, the fallout isn't just felt by those directly involved. It ripples outward, leaving behind unanswered questions, broken families, and a legacy tainted by betrayal. There are those who say they should have seen it coming, that the signs were there all along, hiding in plain sight. But the uncomfortable truth is, people don't always want to see what's right in front of them. They convince themselves that certain individuals, respected figures, authority figures, are incapable of the very crimes they condemn. That illusion is comforting, until it isn't. So, what can we take from this? If nothing else, this case serves as a reminder that evil doesn't always look like we expect it to. It doesn't always come with warning signs that are easy to spot. Sometimes it wears a suit. Sometimes it stands behind a podium. Sometimes it shakes your hand, looks you in the eye, and tells you exactly what you want to hear. And this isn't the only case of a respected figure turning deadly. In our next episode, we'll explore another shocking crime. One that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about trust, power, and the people who hold it. Because sometimes the ones we admire the most are the ones with the most to hide. If you found this case shocking, Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss our next true crime deep dive. Bye-bye.